Fundamentally, how the internet works is changing underneath our feet. If you can do something automatically that takes a human being an hour, you can take an AI agent and get to a lot more people with a lot better content that is a lot more customized to that person's response. It's a lot smarter, a lot wilier, a lot better at creating a deeper and deeper connection, which means you may or may not be able to get someone to make a long-term commitment to you that results in them giving you all of their money.
Today, we're joined by a leader who has secured some of the world's most critical infrastructure on the planet, from the trading floors of the New York Stock Exchange to her new mission at the forefront lines of global internet. Liz Morton has spent her entire career solving the visibility gap. She has over 25 years work experience in IT and security across various industries. Known as the field CISO at Cloudflare, she is sitting at the intersection of global traffic and the AI revolution. In this exclusive interview with AI Cyber Magazine, we discuss how artificial intelligence is transforming cybersecurity and how leaders can adopt it responsibly. From all what you've seen in your decades of experience and just really looking forward into the future, what do you think identity verification would look like in the next decade?
Oh God, I think about this a lot, Confidence. I gotta be honest. Two-factor authentication is ultimately not going to be enough. Critical services, I think about healthcare when I think about this. DDoSing hospitals and healthcare providers is just some scary business.
Liz Morton, welcome to AI Cyber Magazine.
Thank you, Confidence. It's so nice to see you.
It's so nice to see you again. And just for full disclosure, guys, Liz and I have a personal relationship. So
yes,
this will very much be like one of our chats we randomly would have, right?
It's true.
Yeah, but Liz, let's assume someone just stumbled into this conversation and they're a security leader or a professional. Why should they listen to both of us just chat?
Well, I mean, obviously we are incredibly charming and really well spoken and have lots of interesting things to say, clearly. But, you've been around, I've been around maybe a little bit longer. I've been around since, it was 1990 something. And, in general, I think my career has been one that has been shaped by technology, which is a very simplistic way of saying, like, as the industry has changed, I have adapted and modified, both as a hands-on practitioner and as a leader. And, I think I've learned a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we'll get to hear some of them today. But Liz, congratulations on your new role as CISO at Cloudflare. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. What a great organization. I'm so thrilled to be a part of them.
I can imagine. You do such incredible work there. And I'm so glad to hear that you joined them. I was excited personally. But very clearly, that puts you at the front lines, helping organizations really just align their business goals with the reality of modern threats, right? Like as we know it. Now, Cloudflare really just sits on, I would say from my last research, roughly 20% of the web. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So tell us, is AI truly impacting the threat landscape, or is it just hype? And what is Cloudflare really seeing?
So Cloudflare sees, 20% of the global internet's traffic, as you said. That's a casual number that amounts to an incredible amount of everything, an incredible amount of data. I think the figure is something like 234 billion threats a day are blocked by Cloudflare. Billion. Yeah, we're real busy. And it is because of the size and scope of Cloudflare's network that we have the opportunity to not just host so many customers. We have millions of customers. Interestingly, from a commercial perspective, only, I think they have less than 300,000 paying customers, but millions of customers. So people are doing all kinds of things. Some of the largest AI companies in the world work with us, and that means we get to see what they're doing. We get to see what our customers are doing with AI. We also get to see what the threat actors are doing. So is AI having an impact? 100%. One of our kind of biggest products, our products that provide the biggest value, is bot management. Matthew Prince, one of our founders, CEO, came out in July and said, by default, we're not going to allow scrapers to pull content for training data sets for AI anymore. We're not going to do that. Content creators and Confidence, I assume you'll appreciate this.
I do.
Yes. Yeah, because it's a lot of work to create that content.
Yes.
So yeah, when that's your business, if you're a media company, it's maybe a different scale. When you're Confidence and you put several hours into writing an original piece, like, you should be compensated for that work. That's how the media business model has always worked. Well, AI scraper services, bots, all using bots, were coming around and just collecting all that data, scraping sites, and Cloudflare said no more. Now we're going to focus on the new business model for the internet. So, they cover a full range of problems, opportunities, etc., that the internet really provides, not the least of which is that fundamentally how the internet works is changing underneath our feet. And threat actors are adapting along with it. One of the things that you'll hear associated with Cloudflare very often is hypervolumetric DDoS attacks. The quantities, the amount of data, the amount of bits and packets, and just the size of these attacks has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. For right now, it's not really a problem for us because of the amazing network that we've built. That's just one example of many of the ways that AI is being leveraged to just create havoc.
That's very much a scale problem. So one of the ways AI is changing the threat landscape is scale.
It's a one-to-many. You have one model, you write one agent, you create one AI. It can do many, many things, and it never sleeps, and it can scale as long as you can scale infrastructure, right? So as long as you, right, as long as you can keep feeding the compute needs for your AI, you can keep functioning, which means you can grow things bigger and bigger. You can grow your botnets bigger and bigger. You can create more and more synthetic attacks, right? Which means you can spray and pray farther and farther, right? Attackers, as you know, don't have to be accurate. They just have to be there doing something. You love that, huh?
Yeah, they just have to be right once.
That's right. No, that's exactly right. And, for a long time, defenders have known that. It's just a wicked problem. It's the nature of the beast. An attacker can use AI to simulate attacks and make decisions based on a playbook, really, what we would call a playbook in the traditional sense. And if it works, maybe they have another step. Maybe there's another agent that gets handed off the next step, right? From a just very practical perspective, if it's machines doing this, you have an unlimited capacity to really conduct any kind of attack you want to. If you can dream it, you can do it, because AI will frankly write the code for you to try. And if your code isn't secure, it doesn't matter if you're on the attack side, right? Just keep running. It doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't even have to be good.
Wow. That is very scary. But now on the really bright side of things, because Cloudflare is on our side, not the adversary side, right? How is Cloudflare using AI to fight AI-driven threats like you've just described?
Oh, well, bear with me. I've only been there a couple months, so I don't know all the secrets yet. But everything starts around the network. A lot of point solutions, right, in the AI space will make use of a CDN. In our case, we are the CDN. So all of our intelligence starts at the network. So all those hypervolumetric attacks that I just mentioned, those are detected automatically and mitigated. In other words, we just eat them. And that's just one example of how Cloudflare is leveraging AI, automation, really a combination of technologies to provide service and value to customers, but also to lessen the impact of some of these threat actors. Some of these botnets are millions and millions and millions of devices. If you are DOSing a traditionally set up network where you've got a couple of private circuits provided by an ISP, you'll have mitigation that you have to turn on manually. The automated nature of Cloudflare's DDoS mitigation means that there's intelligence under the covers, so to speak, that will allow you to set and forget as the customer. We manage that because we run the network and we have to. Being able to keep out bots, right? That's another one. So bot management is another way that we are leveraging AI to deal with all these bots. As I mentioned before, we had this Content Independence Day back in July where Matthew said, no more are we going to allow bots to just take all this data that's been hard authored by human brains. We're going to, by default, not allow it at all. So just an example, one of the things I like about Cloudflare as an employee is that there's very much an appetite of innovation. Just give it a try. If it works for you, great. Work on making it work for everybody. If it works for us internally, let's make it work for our customers. Not long ago, our CTO came out and said that we're going to make every feature available for every customer, regardless of their level, whether they're pay-go or a free tier customer or an enterprise customer. We're going to make all of those tools available to you. And the reason is that, especially in the age of AI, we all need as much help as we can get. So once we invent the technology, why would we not just make it available for everyone to benefit from?
Generally speaking, we talk about zero trust for employees, but what about zero trust for AI agents? as autonomous agents start making API calls on our behalf, and like you've seen
Mhm.
already, how is Cloudflare helping CISOs authenticate the identity of, say, a bot?
Yeah, it's again, a wicked problem. One bot can be, first of all, let's say good and bad can be subjective. If you are one of those content scrapers, you think your bot is good. If you are a media company, you think that bot is bad,
True.
right?
Yeah.
So that can become the sort of sum total of the problem statement, right? Not every bot is a bad bot. However, the identification problem is one that we work on constantly. And really, the way Cloudflare has an advantage in this area of bot management is the fact that we have a point of presence in, I want to say, 190 plus countries. We have 330 different data centers. We have a scope that, I mean, I think it rivals every largest provider, if not eclipses every largest provider. The way Cloudflare runs data is globally, right? So it's not just by region or zone, it's by the whole picture, right? So when you have the whole picture and you have data from the whole picture, you're able to do correlation of activity, right? So if something looks bad here and it looks bad here and it looks bad here and it looks bad there, it's probably bad. You get more data points, you get more fidelity to your conclusions, right? From a product perspective, a lot of the AI products that Cloudflare has developed have come out of the traditional web tooling that they have, like WAF, like we call it Firewall for AI, for instance. It's built on the same premise as Web Application Firewall. It's incredibly effective for traditional web apps. It's also incredibly effective for AI because you can tune it, configure it for your organization, right? So that individuation is very important because not every company sees things the same way. Mm-hmm. Not every enterprise needs the same set of solutions. Not every developer wants to work with the same constraints, for instance. And so if you can yourself go in and say, no, that activity is actually legit for us, and configure that into a platform that then applies globally, it's pretty great. So those are just some of the ways that we're kind of addressing all this.
You mentioned something along the lines of a firewall, but this time for AI, correct?
Yes.
And then just being able to class those bots as good bots in some context, and depending on what side of the aisle you are, could also be a bad bot.
Sure.
But then there are also like really malicious use cases of bots as well in enterprises, or AI agents as well in enterprises, that I think the industry is beginning to see as well. And there's this conversation about, say, if a human takes an action within an enterprise, you can know Liz did that, right? But how do we attribute? I think it's an attribution question I'm asking. Is Cloudflare helping at all with that attribution and IDing those agents, or in this context, we are calling directly bots, when actions are taken?
Yeah, so I'm sure you've seen, like, again, this is an example. I'm sure you've seen powered by Cloudflare verifying you're a human, right?
Uh-huh.
You've seen it on websites all over, I'm sure.
Yes.
So that's just an example of a similar detection product that is saying we're seeing eyeball activity versus bot activity. And because, again, we have an enormous data set from which to draw, we can determine you're a person. You don't even have to do the terrible thing where you have to click all the squares. Mm-hmm. I always get those wrong. All the squares, it's a traffic light, or all the squares, it's a bicycle. I'm terrible at those. Or like, typing in. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So Cloudflare's figured out that there's a level of randomness that human beings create all on their own. And that detection is part of our bot management platform. So if you're not a human, the likelihood that you're going to get through one of our gates is pretty low.
That's very cool. I totally can relate to that. But also, how are you helping CISOs? When I'm saying you, I mean Cloudflare in this context. How are you helping CISOs move from just detecting shadow AI to actually governing it without slowing down innovation? I know that when we both saw each other this year at RSA, we're talking about shadow AI as well. And I think it's going to continue to be a big issue for a couple of years from now on as well. So, but how are you helping CISOs with this?
Well, I mean, first, it's visibility, right? You have to have a way of detecting what's going on in your world, right? Again, huge network. Our security suite was introduced as kind of a bundle of security solutions for AI in October of 25. And that whole suite is designed to sit at the edge and look at everything coming in and out from into your own models, from into commercially available models, from into models that are hosted in other public clouds potentially. and look at things like prompt injection. Are your guardrails for your model being appropriately applied? Do you have somebody who's trying to potentially poison your model by leading your AI off track? And providing alerting, and not just alerting, but in some cases, full blocking, right? If you have prompts that you just don't want to allow response to, instead of having to rely on your model, you can rely on Cloudflare saying that's outside of the tolerance that's been established in this configuration, block, alert, that kind of thing. It starts to look a lot more like traditional incident response. So I think the way that we've helped CISOs go beyond just saying you may or may not use an LLM, for instance, which is where a lot of us were for kind of a while, it seems. I think we forget how quickly this all happened,
Tell me about it.
Yeah. But now there's a set of tools to allow you to have first visibility, then some understanding of the activity that's going on around your models, and frankly, with your employee use as well. So it applies. Then, finally, the ability to stop attackers potentially from exploiting your models or performing some prompt injections, PII mining, all kinds of things that can be weak. If you have a weak model, if you have a weak access, if your model is configured poorly from an access perspective, right? You are in danger of exfiltrating PII, for instance. Cloudflare can detect that PII and say, we will obfuscate it, block it, not return that data. So it's maybe a belt and suspenders model. It's not perfection in AI development, but it is something to start with, especially if you have established enterprise applications that are AI enabled, like my banking app, for instance, has an AI chatbot. Well, we're talking about a chatbot that potentially has access to some very sensitive, confidential information. As a consumer, I'm pleased to know how many banks work with us to secure their chatbot so that that chatbot can't be kind of misled, if you will, through prompt injection to return confidential data, for instance, because there's a security suite sitting there stopping that from happening.
You've said the word suite and you said the word PII a couple of times. So I'm just going to say that PII means personally identifiable information, but I want you to talk more about that suite. Help us draw a mind map on how that suite of solutions basically could protect, say, that chatbot, your banking chatbot, for example.
Yeah. So again, firewall for AI will work much like a WAF, right? It really does sort of interrogate every single transaction that goes into or out of your model, into or out of your network. Because it sits at the edge, it can also see anything that looks like it's a prompt for an AI and say, oh, that destination must be an AI, even if it's not a commonly known model, right? That is just one of a series of like a suite of products that were kind of developed individually. Again, first around visibility, right? So first you have to be able to see everything. And then you have to be able to actually take action when you have that observability established. So this suite of products, it used to be, I think, 4 or 5 different named products, and we now call it the AI Security Suite.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I just want to pick your brains, Liz.
Okay.
From all what you've seen in your decades of experience and just really looking forward into the future, what do you think identity verification would look like in the next decade?
Oh, God, I think about this a lot, Confidence. I got to be honest. There are days when I think I've got it, and then there are days when I think I got to go back to school. Certainly, there's a lot of investment, especially in the last 2 years. Identity, I don't know, just the cyber community just woke up and went, oh, this identity thing is kind of a big deal. Coming from an operational IT background, it's been kind of a big deal for a long time, mostly because from a compliance perspective and an operational perspective, identity was kind of a pain in the butt. Obviously, threat actors have made a whole lot of headway with just plain old credentials. And that has, I think, been the sort of force, if you will, that has brought identity into the forefront. Then you slap on some of those some of them are unbelievable. The stories of fraud being committed with deepfakes. My least favorite, most favorite, whatever example would be the bank in Singapore. That poor gentleman wired $25 million to 8 deepfakes. Stories like that are not unique anymore. I could go on because, again, this is a wicked problem. This is something that if you are in management in any kind of technical practice, if you are working for a financial institution, a healthcare institution, fraud is a huge problem, and AI generated deepfakes, etc. There's not a great solution. However, identity validation, verification, we're seeing stuff with, I just went to the airport. I went to Lisbon and came back for Cloudflare. I went through Clear scanned my eyes. They know what my eyes look like. And so they know it's me. I have a feeling that it's going to be a combination of AI plus something biometric. In other words, I think two-factor authentication is ultimately not going to be enough. So even though we have these great, authenticator apps that are super convenient, we know the whole problem with SMS-based validation, it's going to have to come down to something you are, I think, as a factor in when you talk about identity verification. Is that something that means we're going to have a chip in our neck? I hope not. Is it something where every person has some sovereign collected piece of identifiable biometric information that has to be presented for significant transactions? I don't really know. That's one, honestly, confidence where I am kind of glad that we have brilliant people working on it who are much younger than I, because I don't know what the right answer is, but it might be one of those things where I don't necessarily have a hand in the creation, but I sure hope that I will have the ability to benefit from it.
Really going to the attack side, you've spoken about the gentleman who was phished initially and then transferred some monies. So we clearly see that attackers are actively experimenting with AI for, say, phishing, for malware and other vices. What do you feel is the most undiscussed way adversaries might weaponize AI?
Well, I thought a lot about this, and I hate to be kind of doom and gloom, but I will say this. I think social engineering is a wide open, hard to predict area of innovation for threat actors. I think that without AI, social engineering is one of the more difficult attack types to defend against.
Why do you think so?
Because people are unpredictable. Because not everybody has the same sense of what's good or bad, what's right or wrong, what's safe or not safe. People are way too independently minded. They're not programmatic. That's one of the reasons why social engineering is so difficult to combat. When I was with Intercontinental Exchange, because they are the owners of the New York Stock Exchange, a very recognizable brand, right? Especially in the financial world. I can't tell you how many times we had to deal with fraud, financial fraud being committed in our name, which, every financial institution has to deal with. Whether you're talking about a retail bank or you're talking about a capital market like the New York Stock Exchange. Having seen some of these schemes up front, just the way that, I hate to use this term, pig butchering, some of those campaigns were so successful and people were, devastated financially, to say nothing of emotionally. I think about that, again, one-to-many capability with an AI. If you have an agent that is kind of LLM powered, trained by a specific set of training data to be really great at getting a human to fall in love with them. And we've seen stories about this. Again, humans are vulnerable. I'm sure you've seen the same stories of people who are doing things like marrying AI agents and having relationships. We laugh, but at the same time, not everyone has the same access to life, to friends, to whatever. Everybody lives a little differently, and there are populations that are vulnerable. My long story here is that I think this may be the next kind of step up, next set of weapons in the fraudsters' quiver, because you can take an AI agent and get to a lot more people with a lot better content that is a lot more customized to that person's response, that's a lot smarter, a lot wilier, a lot better at creating a deeper and deeper connection, which means you may or may not be able to get someone to make a long-term commitment to you that results in them giving you all of their money. That has not just financial effect, that can have devastating personal effect, especially for people who are vulnerable. I think if you can do that at scale, which we know AI is great at doing, the implications are pretty easy to understand. So I worry about that. Looking at kind of the wider map of the world, so looking at stuff that's more enterprise impacting, I always think about critical infrastructure. We know that there are state actors that are strategically pre-positioned in some very important places. Those threat actors definitely know about AI, and attack coordination, conditional event-based triggers become very easy to correlate and identify the perfect time to create some havoc. I worry about that because when you start messing with critical infrastructure, you start messing with human lives. And we all know that OT and IoT are ripe for exploitation. I think that's maybe the understatement of my year. They are already highly exploited attack surfaces. So I worry about that. And then, of course, I wouldn't be a good Cloudflarean if I didn't point out that those hypervolumetric attacks that we are so good at consuming for a non-Cloudflare customer may be problematic, especially if you get hit with a hypervolumetric attack at a important inflection point for business, for the delivery of critical services. I think about healthcare when I think about this. DDoSing hospitals and healthcare providers is just some scary business. So all these things AI has already proven to be very good at. And of course, we talked about just the ability for threat actors to author attacks and just run them at random. Instead of having to walk down the street and try the door yourself, you walk down the entire world's streets and somebody else helps you try all the doors all at once, potentially.
Oh my God.
Yeah, sorry, it's not very happy.
God. That's such a vivid picture you just painted. Yeah.
I do think about this stuff and I do worry about this stuff. Having stepped into a role where I'm more advisory and I am talking to more of my peers that are in a variety of industries. I used to be very focused on the financial industry. And one of the wonderful things about being a field CISO is that because I deal with everybody, I get to hear about everybody's issues and problems. I would just take the healthcare industry alone, what folks that are working in that industry have to deal with, and the stakes that they are dealing with is unbelievable.
And they have a lot of OT, IoT devices as well.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to scramble up what that would look like.
Well, and a lot of healthcare providers, for various reasons, are very much budget bound. And it's nature of the business, nature of consolidation, et cetera. When you don't have a huge budget, as financial services companies tend to because of the incredible regulatory pressure that are on those entities, you tend to do the things that are on fire. You tend to take care of the things that are in the worst shape first. We have a whole lot of tech debt in this world, especially when we get to areas of critical infrastructure. Thinking about the implications of having a nonstop, relentless attacker that can be as intelligent as it can access data and move as quickly as a machine can move, you see how very quickly in the hands of the wrong actor, that could be catastrophic.
When you say things like relentless, personalized, and all of those other terms you've used to basically describe how agents and AI, generally speaking, can deliver social engineering effectively, way more than we've ever seen it. And you talk about it also in the context of people who may not be as savvy as we are, the most vulnerable amongst us. I just begin to think about the door that's open for possibly another player that is not necessarily just focused on enterprises, because the bulk of times we talk about security is enterprise focused. How about some player or even the governments? Are they stepping up to think about what they could be doing in the future to protect the most vulnerable? My mind is piling on that end. So the elderly, for example, children accessing the internet,
Oh my goodness.
and all of what that could be with AI in the mix and delivering social engineering. I'm thinking about, for example, we've seen teenagers unaliving themselves because of something around some scam or something that someone is threatening them with. You get what I mean? So if I add that with what you've described to me now, that's a very vulnerable group as well, that we know that anything that impacts them could also take a life. I don't know if you've seen anything with governments or any ideas around how anyone watching this could take that up and possibly do something to help in the future.
I'm in no way an expert in this area. However, I am a few things, a parent and a technologist, and the daughter of a woman who is approaching 80. So I've got my card full of worry when it comes to the implications of technology writ large, both personally and professionally, because it's my given profession. I would say that there are government entities, especially in the EU, that are looking at AI from a privacy perspective.
Okay.
In the US, I think we are thinking about governing AI, monetizing AI, and I think AI moves at lightning speed. The defensive AI moves slower than that. So we're always going to outstrip our ability to defend, right? That's the nature of technology. Something new and awesome shows up. Somebody figures out a maybe less awesome thing to do with it. We have to then defend against that less awesome thing, right? That takes time. It takes knowledge. In AI, I think we have a huge gap of knowledge and education.
In your experience as well, what's the most surprising underutilization of AI that you've seen in security programs?
Right now, as much as we are at a place where we're doing more real stuff, if I could say real stuff with AI, we're still building the boat. And there's a lot of experimentation going on. One of the things that I think AI is especially good for is, sort of taking a big data set and correlating all that data and coming up with new and interesting ways of looking at problems, solutions, etc. So for instance, you have 250 vulnerabilities that just came out of your latest scan. 10 of them are crits, where you're going to focus your time. 20 of them are highs, and the rest are mediums, lows. What is difficult is to say, okay, so you have this high and this crit on this host, and you have a configuration item that's a problem here, or a configuration that's a problematic on that same host, and you have an application that's using a bad library. There's some vulnerabilities, but they're really only mediums. So in other words, like problem management, let's look at this host. Let's look at this application. Let's look at this subnet. Where are all the problems? Creating, in other words, like a heat map of an organization potentially at the sort of widest lens. Mm-hmm. If you have like 5 or 6 problems with one host, can we just have something say, you need to take a maintenance window and do these 5 things? Like, I'm surprised that I don't see and hear more about AI-powered problem management. It's not much of a concept in cybersecurity. It's definitely something that is born right out of ITIL. But thinking about all of my vulnerability management people who are just suffering, that seems like an excellent way to move faster. One of the things that's kind of part of the philosophy at Cloudflare that I really appreciate is that AI makes good people better, or great people amazing, but it is a terrible replacement for humans. And it is. Mm-hmm. Right. So we made all these processes that we've been running for years and years and years. We do them not because they're bad processes. Mm-hmm. We just kind of do them poorly because they're impossible. If you run a fleet of 100,000 servers even, which mm-hmm. is a fraction the size of some of the largest enterprises at this point, you have 100,000 servers, you can end up with 10 million vulnerabilities. How do you prioritize that? And in the end, does it matter if you're getting your crits, your mediums, your highs, your lows within SLA? If you're having to take 7 windows for one host, making that impossible task easier is something AI should be pretty good at. So again, I think we're going to get there. And I don't think it's like something I've seen that is an egregious underutilization. I think it is just part and parcel of where we're taking AI and kind of the journey we're on. I think we very much understate how much of that we still have to do before we have answers.
True. And I totally agree with you on that. And I've never heard that phrase before. I think that's unique to you, Liz. Problem management, as it has to do with security. So, right. Because I think that's a broader circle where vulnerability management could be inside of it, but it's a broader circle, right?
Right.
And that really brings me to just really talking about convergence. You hinted about it earlier on, but I want us to really go deeper. There have been several talks about the convergence of IT and security. Do you see AI accelerating that convergence?
I do. I think it started. I mean, I'm kind of living proof of that convergence, frankly, because I had a pretty long career in IT and operations and really security engineering, but didn't move into cyber until I was about 20 years into my career. So I'm very heavily influenced by my background in kind of more broad IT. I think cyber can very much benefit from following some of the common practices, right? By being more operational. It just makes you more effective and faster. And speed, as we know, is part of the game, especially when you have an intrusion, when you are doing incident response. The sooner you're able to get to a definitive answer, the better. AI makes all of this faster. And again, one to many, you can write one AI that can then create havoc for 10 million hosts. Like that. Never turns off. With a little bit more operational rigor, what you get is you get more solid configuration. You get more regular patching. In other words, you kind of remove the low-hanging fruit if you follow some of the more traditional IT practices. Following your policy for patching. Some companies, it's every month. Some companies, it's every year. Some companies, the end user compute fleet goes once a month and production goes once a quarter. Everybody has a cadence of maintenance that they're able to maintain. Your IT people are going to be very focused on doing that efficiently with no downtime, as little of downtime as possible, right? And their procedures are going to support that. As a cyber person, what's the difference if you're also doing vulnerability remediation or configuration remediation? there's no difference. You're just doing it under a different guise. You're doing it under the guise of securing versus improving or making available, or really just sometimes if you're on the IT side, you're just getting a ticket done from cyber and you're like, whatever I'm doing here, just need to get to the next one because I've got another 300,000 servers to patch. Some of this work can be very thankless, but when you put it in context, it really is like kind of the perfect marriage of like the people who know where the security issues are and the people who can actually do something about it, right? And that segregation of duties, I think, is important because let's not forget, availability is important. Having someone do an assessment of the risk that a vulnerability presents, because not all vulnerabilities are risks, right? You got a vulnerability that's deep in your innermost non-routable network, and you've got one sitting on your DMZ facing out to the world. Which one's more important? Both are vulnerabilities, but this one right here is a risk, right? So having those skill sets working together is, I mean, it's one of the reasons why we're seeing this convergence, right? Because they are very complementary to one another and you can't have one without the other. This isn't 10 or 15 years ago when security was a luxury item.
Do you think that convergence would happen mainly as it has to do with leadership, or it's going to happen with leadership and also with tools? How do you picture this happening? Because I think we're already seeing that on the side of leadership.
Oh, for sure. I think there's all kinds of ways we'll get there. Leadership tends to be the most visible because, frankly, a lot of leaders, myself included, I think it's more of a grassroots effort, really. Security and IT are converging, not because security and IT people are like two different tribes coming together. It's converging because the work is very similar. And again, like I said, can't have one without the other anymore. And at a base level, I think that if you've spent your whole career in IT and you meet someone who's spent their whole career in cyber, it's not like you're meeting somebody who's done something totally different, you know? And I really do think that when you get to the ground level and you get engineers just doing work, especially in organizations, I will say this helps a lot, especially in organizations that have kind of quote unquote shifted left with their security practice. So you begin a project talking to your security team. Those guys have good ideas. Your IT people have good ideas. Everybody can kind of take from everybody else and improve. This is just practical. You know, the work, the tactical work of security is done very often by IT. And the ideas for how and why and the explanations of why it matters can come from anywhere. But cyber is usually a great guide for why we have to do this. What does it matter? And that educates your IT people. And then they become more of a force multiplier for the cyber practice.
I like the thought of force multiplier there. But what really is exciting you now as it has to do with AI's potential to strengthen defenses against sophisticated adversaries?
We've got this going on at Cloudflare, that huge amount of data that we have because of the size and scope. And it's not just at Cloudflare. There are lots of organizations that are doing really interesting work with, you know, really large data sets, creating models that can be very specifically expert. I think that's pretty cool. I think there's likely a lot of research going on for the creation of defender models. I think that is a really, really interesting thing that's on the horizon. Yeah. If you've ever read any AI red teamers, those guys are like, they are discovering ways of exploiting AI models in ways that probably nobody who created them ever thought of. It's a whole different practice and a whole different skill set, frankly. I think when you have enough of those folks, enough of those AI red teamers kind of putting out findings, writing books, putting out white papers, doing interviews like this, frankly, the world gets to know a little bit more about how AI works practically day to day at an advanced level, right? You can kind of do a 101 tutorial on AI and be like, oh, okay, I kind of know how it works. But until you try and break something, and this is why I love red teamers, because they see something, the same thing I see, and I'm like, ooh, I'm going to make X, Y, or Z. They're like, I'm going to break it. When you try to break something, you really have to understand how it works. From a very practical perspective. That's the definition of reverse engineering. You have to figure out how it works so you can exploit it. And those folks, I think, have been a wealth of information, for me at least, on where AI is really sitting from a security perspective, right? Mm-hmm. We know we can enable our SOC, for instance, with AI to do correlation and sort of false positive, for instance, tuning much more easily. cool. That's a data trick. So you start to see how these complex interrelationships and how each model performs under pressure, how that begins to matter, especially when you have models talking to models and there's no human intervention, especially when you're talking about the doing of an action, the transferring of funds, the turning on or off of a municipality's water service, for instance. You definitely want to know how your AI is going to answer when the question is coming from maybe a less trusted source. And I think that's one of the more exciting avenues of exploration in this area from a security perspective.
Awesome. Now let's look forward to the future as we sort of close up this conversation. I know that there were some people who insisted on using typewriters way into the time when computers were in circulation and in use. So I'm also thinking that there could very much be organizations that would not want AI anywhere in their cybersecurity workflows, right? So I want to ask you that question with that context in view. In the next 5 years, what would distinguish organizations that successfully integrate AI into their cybersecurity workflows from those that fail?
Well, it depends on how much they failed. So I would say if you are running an organization where AI is not possible, not allowed, not a happening thing, I guess, and for one reason or another, and every organization's different, what you run the risk of course, is missing out on all of the great learning opportunities that AI will provide for your staff, as well as, which by the way becomes a retention issue for people because nobody wants to work on old stuff forever, unless they're at their end of their career. For new generations coming in who are coming out of computer science programs, they're studying AI and they want to make use of their skills. So one, I think retention becomes an issue. If you are using traditional automation versus AI, maybe you're okay. But taking what I said before about how AI makes good humans great and great humans amazing, you miss out on all of that. If you can do something automatically that takes a human being an hour, how long do you think it is before you're buried by your competition who's using AI to do simple road tasks automatically instead of an hour, either serially or in combination? You're talking about higher headcount, which there's a whole debate about AI taking jobs. I don't really cotton to that so much because I think what it's going to do is make jobs more interesting if applied properly.
Okay. That's some good context to it.
Yeah.
Some good perspective.
Well, for instance, I'll choose a dumb example. We don't want to use an LLM to help us write emails. We're going to write every stinking word ourselves. How much are you getting out of that? If you're showing up every day to, manually check a spreadsheet, are you really creating value? Are you even really living and working in this world? And it's not because AI is everything. It isn't today, but we see this happening. It is happening. This is going to be the way that we get information. If you don't want to use AI, please don't Google anything. Because, when you, I'm being kind of a smart aleck here, but try and avoid AI at this point is what I'm saying. And if you don't want to be a part of that, you will be left behind. And I assume what will happen from a business perspective is that your costs will remain high because your labor costs will remain high because you will have to have people doing things that would be easily automated away. In my mind, in fairness, I obviously have kind of a vivid imagination. I see that as a very boring, terrible place to work because the work is not going to be what you're making people do without AI. It's not fun. It's not interesting work. It's not drawing on human creativity. If you think about your business as having a set of core competencies, a human being's core competency is not clicking a button or typing numbers into spreadsheets. A human being's core competency is much more centered on thought, creativity. Yeah, dot connecting, new ideas, problem solving. That's really where human capital matters the most. So if you get rid of all those stupid, dear sir or madam, thank you so much for your inquiry, all that dumb stuff that when you were using typewriters back in the day, you could get paid, $5 an hour to write a letter like that, take dictation or something. That's just not the world kind of happy, productive humans occupy. Not today, and certainly not in 20 years. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But I want a final word to be for CISOs, because those are the people you mostly serve and interact with.
Yeah.
If you could give one piece of advice to CISOs about AI today, what would it be?
It comes down to kind of skills growth, don't underestimate how important it is to grow skills or buy them to enable AI for your organization. And this can kind of be a sticky wicket. Like I said, buy skills. Have you been watching what like Zuckerberg's been doing, and he wants to go pay every AI
I have been seeing
scientist
that.
$1 billion? Yeah.
That's a crazy kind of buy skills.
Yeah. Well, that's a very special set of circumstances, isn't it? I don't think that's going to be around forever. I think in general, like I mentioned before, kids that are in school for computer science right now, they're studying AI. The demand for those skills is going to remain strong, but the supply is going to go up, which is going to lower your salary to something that is probably still quite good, but probably not $1 billion. Sorry, kids. As AI skills become more ubiquitous, it's going to obviously add to how AI is impacting IT, security, everything really. So I would say today, if I were sitting a team, I will at some point, I would take it out of my mind, this idea that training or hiring an extra person, nobody wants to hire any more people. Nobody wants to go to their boss and say, or go to their board and say, I need to fund an AI expert. I need to fund a headcount. I need to send my team to training at X dollars. No one really wants to do that because nobody, I think, really wants to highlight the lacking in the skill set. And it's everywhere. There are so few true AI experts in the world relative to the need. So I would say to CISOs, like, don't be afraid to boldly take a step back. It's not a step back, but boldly take a step back, take on some expense, take on some, maybe one less project in order to give your team, for instance, time to go train. Like you will go faster if you take the time to buy or build AI skills on your team and then leave time to let that team innovate, experiment, let them try things and fail. You learn more through failure than you learn through success. So you have to kind of be a chief R&D officer in some ways. And I would say that's true for CISOs. It's true for CIOs. It's true for CTOs. It's true really for anybody who is trying to take knowledge workers and make value out of them, so to speak.
Thank you, Liz. This has been very eye-opening. This has been very helpful, and I'm sure it's going to be, I'm sure it's going to be very helpful for our audience as well. Just having the range of people we get to see, watch these videos or read the magazine, get to learn this much from you. Thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed this chat.
Of course. It's always wonderful to talk to you, Confidence. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.